This solstice, we will be, as we have made tradition, celebrating through a Rama festival all night, all day extravaganza. We'll be live from our Mallorca studio in Spain, here in Los Angeles, live with practitioners and celebrants and amazing teachers. Join us to activate, optimize, and celebrate on the most powerful day of the year, summer solstice. Hi, Rama Festival and Reality Riffing. I'm so excited that we were able to put this together so quickly. I'm here with my dearest friend, Alan Steinfeld, and his dear friends, JJ Hurtak and Desiree Hurtak. We are going to be talking about making contact and everything in between. Alan has a new book coming out, and obviously, if you're not familiar with JJ and Desiree's work, their work on sound frequencies and the elevation of consciousness has been monumental to everything that we know. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. It's always great to be wherever you are, and that could be anywhere. Thank you. Great to see you again.
So good to see you. You guys are in Sedona, yeah?
Yes, beautiful. Sedona is like a paradise here. The frequency here is really different than other places. So you can feel it in the red rocks.
And also the level of contact. I mean, many people have seen lights in the sky out of Thunder Mountain or over Castle Rock, many places. So it's really an open vortex, we consider.
And you know, the frequency on the planet is changing, and it's great to be in a place that grounds that. The red rocks are red because of the iron, which creates a magnetic field and more oxygen. And it's a good place to just be out in nature. What do you think, JJ?
I think this is the ideal place to be. Sedona is really a mecca for new thinking, great healing, what I call the medicine of light. And of course, work with music and sound, which is the inner, should we say, vibratory code of why we are in this shape and form.
Right.
And so we're honored really to share it with the Rama tradition, the great traditions of teaching on health and spiritual connectiveness.
Yes. And before, I just want to do a quick commercial for this book. This is the advanced copy called Making Contact, which is preparations for the new realities of extraterrestrial existence. And this is a collection of essays, and the Hurtaks have contributed a really beautiful essay about the multidimensional existence. But I also have Linda Moulton Howe there, Whitley Strieber, Darrell Anka, Mary Rodwell, Carolyn Corey, really the people I feel who've investigated a lifetime into this phenomenon, what's really going on, because the government is not telling us what's going on.
You call it the new page of history, looking at the cosmic frontier through the development of the mind or higher consciousness.
And what's great about the Hurtak's teaching is that they combine a spiritual awakening with what they call the cosmic others.
Right, exactly. Well, we consider this planet as just one of many. We're certainly not alone in the universe. But more importantly to us is we're not alone in the cosmos of multi-dimensions. And so we believe in addition to extraterrestrials, there are also what we call ultra-terrestrials, and some people call them celestial beings, other beings that are not necessarily in the physical form. But, you know, we're all interrelated, and that's the whole thing of quantum physics. Even scientists, as you know, Alan, are telling us there's a non-locality, there's an entanglement, we're all connected together.
So we're scientists as well as spiritual thinkers. And as you know, the great traditions of India, the Bhagavad Gita, the Mahabharata, speak of other civilizations, other levels of creation, which have largely been ignored here in the West. But now we see a new frontier where the scientists, and particularly some of the astronauts that we've worked with, are beginning to come out of the closet and say, well, we've observed lights in the sky, we have observed what appears to be advanced technologies. And this brings into, shall we say, discussion, how we are to prepare to negotiate with other worlds of intelligence. Is it simply through technology, or is it through spiritual philosophy?
So I'm saying in this book, there's more to the human being than we've been told by our politics, our media, our religion, all that. And we're waking up. This is what your work is about. Tell them a little bit about the tech, because you named that institute Spiritual Technology when you first came up with it. I was hanging out around there.
I'm not being reverse interviewed by you, Alan Steinfeld.
He always does that.
Don't
It's
you
okay.
try your reverse.
No, okay, it's your
No, I'm teasing you. But no, I would really like to just, JJ, I would love for you to talk a little bit about your story, because I think for those who haven't heard this, our community is very interested in sound, and I would love to hear, just a little mini version of what happened, because I think that's a nice place to start. Then let's talk about disclosure and head out that direction.
This is an incredible story, and he is one of a kind. That's why I like hanging out with him and Desiree, because what happened to you, JJ, was like an opening. So tell people.
Well, I'm a social scientist, that is to say, one who's worked with linguistics, mathematics, geology, etc. But I'm also a composer and a spiritual philosopher. I was hired by Walt Disney's brother back in the 1970s to work as a faculty member of California Institute of the Arts in Southern California. And I had the opportunity as a composer to work with Ravi Shankar from India, Leonard Bernstein, some of the great musical composers. And I began to realize with the new technology that Morton Subotnick and others like him were developing, that cosmic attunement also begins with spiritual realization that our body is a musical instrument. Ravi told me when he was playing the sitar, how he could leave his body, go into the audience and look back at his physical body. And I said, your 10 fingers are like 10 elephant trunks. Shall we say, crocheting the spirit of the universe. And so in my search for the divine, I began to use Sanskrit, Hebrew, ancient Aramaic, and Egyptian mantras to see whether or not the sounds would evoke a higher state of contact and experience. And in early 1973, I had that experience that I read about in the Keys of Enoch. We're in deep meditation and using sound, structures, sacred mantras. Suddenly a sphere of light appeared before me. Out of this sphere of light, a being of intelligence appeared by the face. A mental contact took place, and I was asked if I was ready. And I said I was, in deep humility. And from that moment, my body physically was bilocated into another dimension. The sounds were, shall we say, literally of a higher vibratory frequency. I would compare it to, if you have musical background, those of you who are seeing this program, to the F sharp, A sharp frequency on the piano, which is the basic sound structure of Mother Earth. That I was pulled to the higher frequency. I heard these celestial melodies that are comparable to the ragas and also to certain forms of mystical music that we find in the ancient Near East. And I then had experienced these beings of light, which changed my whole reality, recognizing that our universe is multidimensional and our Mother Earth is really a schoolhouse, and people here have to wake up and feel the vibration of life. Otherwise, people are basically sleepwalkers. They go around in a body that's not awake.
So he was gone for 3 days with his body to these higher realms. And when he came back, he didn't channel, but he brought back, can you show us the book? This book called The Keys of Enoch, Book of Knowledge, which is so multidimensional that there's still revelations happening. Even this year, he found in his own writing some prophecies that he predicted that kind of came through in 1973.
Such as the name of the vice president of the United States, the importance of what we call the black hole physics, of how one is able to transit different dimensions in the universe, things that normally would not be available or of interest to people, and should we say 48 years ago. I have a picture that I brought with me.
I also want to say Desiree was there afterwards to witness the light around
one
him.
of the other experiences that happened some 25 years later.
Here, let me just put this up a little closer.
I was in Mexico in the area of Tulum by the pyramids, singing again songs of glory to God, the divine source in the ancient Hebrew and Sanskrit, and a light appeared around my body, as you can see here. A man was taking a picture of his wife at the lower part of the screen, which I'm pointing to, and was able to capture in a few seconds this light that appeared around my body like a garment of light. And you can see my translator behind me, who was simply taken back by the fantastic light star. I call it a superluminal energy burst And this was a confirmation of events that I've had since 1973, recognizing that people should go beyond the extraterrestrial into the ultra-terrestrial, because there we find the spiritual understanding, the psychological understanding, the positive understanding that we're not alone in the universe.
Right.
To bow down and worship spaceships is not the way. And we have to understand that others in space who are, so we say, thousands of years more advanced in technology are just like us. They work with a cosmic law. They work with the divine spark of intelligent life.
So what's exciting is basically we now know from extraterrestrial reports that some of these beings are actually working not only in the third or fourth dimension, but also in the fifth dimension, because they can take people through walls, they can materialize. So how does this all work? And that's part of our study. We're the Academy for Future Science. But there's so much going on now with the government disclosure. Maybe we can shift towards
Before we do that, I just want to say this is why we're all doing this. This is what the Rama Festival, everything we're all doing is because there's a shift right now in the vibrational resonance of this physical body, of this earth.
Well, we call it a space-time overlap where other dimensions are really coming closer to us, and we're getting the thought forms, the wisdom, the knowledge about this. And Dr. Hurtak, in his experience, actually in 1973, was told that 64 areas of science would take a quantum leap forward. And we've seen that. I mean, look at like the idea of cloning and DNA, astrophysics, history, everything.
So I just want to say, this is why the government now is disclosing, because somehow they get a sense that things are not what they used to be. We're moving into some new realities and they can hold on to what is past. So they're breaking this story disclosure sort of slowly, but in a very haphazard way, I think.
They've been able to not do this.
Okay.
You go back to the Vimanas of, the ancient Sanskrit. It's been around for thousands and thousands of years. But now, because what we feel is happening on this planet, whether it's environmental change or other factors, maybe just our day of graduation, these vehicles and other intelligences are starting to make their appearance. And we feel that's why the government's disclosing. It's like they've known about
They
it.
have to.
Yes. What else were you going to say? You were going to say? Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say that there's definitely, and has been like this, but now it's even more, like everything is more. There's a disinformation going along with this partial disclosure.
Yes.
Can you guys speak to that, or what your opinions are around that? Because I think it's important for people to get that there's a reason why they're putting out what they're putting out, and there is a narrative and agenda. And what do we all think that is?
Well, I'll just tell you, in December of 2020, there was something, the COVID relief bill, and the last 5 pages of that bill, it said that the intelligent agencies must come forward and report about what they know in 180 days to the public and to the government. And this was part of the Senate Intelligence Committee's request, which Marco Rubio is a part of. So there's a guy named Luis Alessandro. He worked for the Pentagon, and then he left the Pentagon, and he's part of what a civilian program called To the Stars. And somehow he's a bridge between the intelligence and the civilian world. So when he was asked, are we going to get the secrets in 180 days? He goes, well, there's all these reports we have to put out and we don't know. And some of it might be top secret. The other thing that they're hedging their bets on July 23rd, Eric Davis spoke in front of this Senate committee and says, the government has crash retrievals of UFO ships.
Right.
And then you get Luis Alessandro and Christopher Mellon, who are part of this inside government, saying, well, we don't know if they have crash retrievals. So they give us a little and take us away, because then people don't know what to think. So there's something that's cracking open, and yet they're hedging their bets. So what do you think about that, JJ?
Well, clearly the government has had space metal from extraterrestrial sources and beyond. For example, in the 1970s, I was able to bring back metal that was privately analyzed by Marcel Vogel, one of the top scientists at IBM in California, which I turned over to the Air Force. Of course, I don't have any sample yet because I never got it back.
Of course.
Naively, I thought the government would be coming out back in the 70s, surely by the 1980s. And of course, I participated with Dr. John Mack from Harvard University at the first government disclosure project in 1995 in Washington, D.C., where we put things on the table, including a mannequin that resembled what I would call one of the extraterrestrials, grays, or the small specimen 1 meter high that some of the Air Force people that I talked to claim came down to several of the Air Force stations over the last 50, now 70 some years.
Right.
In short, the government has a ton of information, and one has to think of the Spielberg film called Close Encounters of the Third Kind, the last part of the film showing the warehouse where you're hiding the real ET information.
Real Ark of the Covenant.
Right.
Lost information.
Well, actually, we feel, the question is, why haven't they come out with this back in 1947 or whenever? So the answers are, we think it's quite complex. First of all, they realize there's not just one extraterrestrial intelligence out there. There could be many. And there's a recent book, and Dr. Jagat and I are working on a similar Facebook. This is called the Extraterrestrial. Go ahead.
Almanac, Species Almanac.
Species.
It goes over the characters or drawings of some 82 different specimens.
So it's not easy to talk about, contact, because who are they in contact with? The other aspect is the fact that they had in the past, and Robert Sala talks about this, actually neutralized our nuclear weapons inside the silos. And this happened along the whole northern border of the United States. It also happened in an area in England, which was a hidden nuclear weapons base called Bentwaters. There's a joint Air Force US and Royal Air Force base. And they actually appeared for 3 days. The third day, they actually put down beams of light and neutralized all the silos. So
what Desiree, speaking of, refers to a memorandum that was released in 1976 that spoke of fast-flying elusive objects over military locations from Maine to Montana. The second part of her conversation was an event in Bentwaters in 1980 that was looked at by both British as well as American intelligence officers. So in short, there's a amount of information. The question is the American public ready psychologically and sociologically to accept the theme that we're not alone in the universe?
Well, I think it's the government are they ready? Because what's really going on, I feel, is that they don't know what's going on. They don't know how to tell us there's things out there and we don't know where they're from, what they're doing, or what they want. So they're giving us clues, like they went from UFO to UAP. You heard the term UAP, which means unexplained aerial phenomena. So they went from objects, flying objects, to phenomena, meaning that this whole situation is more than just lights in the sky. It has to do with cognitive awareness, cognitive distortion, who we are as human beings, and what is the nature of consciousness. That is really what I get to in this book.
Right. And this is so important, Alan's new book, because one of the things that it talks about is contact. And it's not just contact like someone lands and you get to touch the vehicle or shake an ET hand, but it's actually consciousness contact. Yeah. So ultimately, it seems that even if you see a UFO at a distance, you've actually become entangled. That's a quantum physicist discussion. You become entangled with the consciousness of that UFO. It's hard for us to understand that. We get it a little bit with the idea of remote viewing. It's the same thing. We are connecting on many levels with extraterrestrial beings.
Contact is
fascinating. That is fascinating, Desiree. I think that's a very important point.
And that is the point of Alan's book, actually.
Contact is an inside job, really. It's not just them reaching down. We have to shift in order to reach up and make
contact with the right consciousness.
Right. So Professor Eshed in Israel, who was head of the space program of Israel, said that their government and the US government is in touch with alien intelligence. In fact, he's even claiming that some of them have gotten together and brought US people to Mars, for example. But he said that, we wanted to release some of the things, but even the extraterrestrials don't know if we're ready. And we're good friends. One of the writers in this book is Linda Moulton Howe, one of my favorite people on the planet. And she talks about this one contact with an extraterrestrial. It was done by the military, and the military set up a person to talk and communicate with an alien. And when he did, he threw 7 layers of information simultaneously to this military strong macho kid. And then on top of that was like a flame script. The guy passed out. I mean, that's really
So
certain
we
levels
have
of
to be
intelligence.
more lucid in consciousness. That's why meditation, all that breathing work, that is so important to build a solid foundation for making contact, because we need to shift reality in order to do this.
Consciousness is the hidden variable for quantum transition. So consciousness is
Mm.
our specialization. I've had the opportunity to use sacred mantras with several astronauts that I work with, government leaders of other countries, social psychiatrists, shamans throughout the world know that we have within us the ability to work on a higher frequency of the mind, and that will open the perceptual doors, not only of the mind, but also the human heart, to recognize that we are brothers and sisters in space. Now, the traditional approach by the naysayers was to assassinate the character of those who are bringing forth new information. And this is why I want to say for the audience, not familiar with the work, we have also another book called Mind, Dynamics in Space and Time with Dr. Elizabeth Rauscher, who is the top female mathematician in the United States, working at Stanford Research Institute. This large book goes into the research with consciousness, the ability to communicate over space and time, over vast distances. So we are credentialed scientists. We have worked with the top people behind the scenes in various countries who are recognizing that world governments, by and large, have to go through what we call disclosure, putting the facts on the table that we're not alone.
Okay, thank you.
Now,
Go ahead.
we shift to you.
Well,
Because we want to have the audience recognize that we have many, many interesting pictures and diagrams of the abilities to project, for example, to Egypt and to different parts of the world with the power of the mind, to go through the archaeological areas and to come up with information by the power of remote viewing.
And people may say, why is this important with extraterrestrials? Well, we were associated with a gentleman called Dan Bursch, and he supposedly was one of the microbiologists at Area 51. And he claims to have seen face-to-face and worked with face-to-face an alien intelligence that they had underground at Area 51. But he went one step beyond, because when he interacted with this alien being, actually the alien being threw thoughts into his head so that Dan saw his whole planet and what his whole lifestyle was about. So, you know, they can talk, from what we know, they can speak, but the most part, they don't. They prefer this mental communication, and we're starting to grow into that. And we feel the whole idea of a space-time overlap is giving us the knowledge, the wisdom, and the understanding of how to make that greater connection, not just with extraterrestrials, I want to emphasize that, but even with other cosmic beings.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that in the yogic sciences and traditions, we use certain types of meditative, sacred kind of whatever we call it tradikam, but yantra, mandala, whatever you want to say. And these images, I'm sure, are in some way in that category to basically train the optic nerve to have the pineal gland secrete appropriately to be able to actually perceive the multi-dimensional reality. And I think that's where all of this kind of comes together. And there's actually something, JJ, that I think is fascinating about that in the yogic scriptures. They say that there's all of these portals of entry in the physical body to the sacred places on planet Earth, and that you can traverse those sacred places through meditative and yogic and breath practices.
My late colleague, Dr. Lee Sanella, wrote a book on Kundalini, and he was explaining how the 7 chakras really are portals of experience. And so we have within our body the ability to move through vibratory sound. I call it syntony, into a symphony of the universe. And if we follow these sounds and we master these sounds, it is possible to operate not only as human beings on Mother Earth, but also as cosmic citizens in relationship to these other levels of intelligence.
And we feel, and we've done lectures on this, just like the body has the chakra areas, so does the planet. I know one of the places you like to go to is Mexico, and that is a place where UFOs are also seen all the time. So we feel that's one of the chakra points of the planet. Some others are the Middle East. There's also India and parts of the Far East, and even areas like Hawaii. So
But you know what you just said, that this internal space is connected to everyone on every place on the planet. But what's happening now, as we open up to this cosmic level, we are connected to every place in the cosmos. I think that's the next level here.
yeah, so we feel in addition to the chakras, the grid points on the planet, what we call vortexes, there's also threshold dimensions. And I know that's been talked about also in the ancient scriptures. And we're starting to open some of those threshold gates. And those gates are being opened so that these other levels of intelligence are communicating. In fact, Dr. Hurtak in his book, The Keys of Enoch, talked about how we've been in a state of quarantine. And this was back in the 70s, so it's not a contemporary quarantine. But basically, we've been protected so we can grow, so we can develop the pineal gland, as you're mentioning, and we start learning about ourselves. But in actuality, we're part of a cosmic interdimensional reality, and these gates are now opening, which is why we feel that the government knows it has to make its disclosure now, because otherwise they're going to be usurped by other alien intelligences.
We have done musical testing of all of the sacred areas in Yucatan, Mexico, in some close to Mexico City, and we found that they all are aligned with the heart chakra. So the ancients of major civilizations knew that we were musically, mathematically, and linguistically connected with the soundscape of the universe. And that's the lost knowledge between the pure scientific and the abstract religious that needs to be brought forth. We live in a time of unity where the scientific and the spiritual converge.
Right.
If I can shift for just a minute, Dr. Hurtak in his book, The Keys of Enoch, talks about 2004 as a critical year of one of those chakra point openings, because we feel that certain years like 73, I think it's 78, the 80s, are all chakra points. And 2004 was the third chakra level of opening the grid. And that's exactly when the Nimitz experience happened, which is where the government has now started to release the information about the Navy seeing UFOs.
So, Ellen, why don't you summarize for the
Wait,
audience?
let me see if she has anything to respond.
I love you guys. You're so cute. I'm having the best time. Just a little sardine in here. So much genius in one little sardine window. No, I was just going to say that what is your opinion in terms of the rips in time space that have opened unnatural portals from the Nazi kind of thing, different kind of agreements with extraterrestrials, and then also Project Paperclip and the Fourth Reich. I mean, I think this is very important for what's happening right now, even with COVID and, all.
Yeah, I think the COVID, whatever that was a kind of resetting of those time-space continuums that went off into these strange directions. So we had to regroup as a planet to kind of set the timeline straight, in a sense. So we had to go in and disconnect from the way things are done. So perhaps we could take a greater road to our higher potential. So that's why I think, whether it was artificially created or infused, it was a year-long spiritual retreat for the planet, for everyone to go in and reevaluate what do they want to do with themselves and reset their own personal timeline, and then maybe create a better future. So we are in the threshold of a new time. That's my opinion. What do you think, JJ?
Well, addressing the observation that a lot of the technology of World War II was misused and perhaps influenced by, say, negative cosmic forces. All of this is coming out really through the work that's being championed by the new work of Harold Pudoff and Tommy Long and others who are looking at, should we say, the not so positive use of the extraterrestrial scenario. And I think the government has used these negative stories to keep the positive information under wraps. And I think this is very important. We see the complete picture that we are, and our ancestors have been in touch.
We'll talk about
with cosmic intelligence. Well, first of all, the Mahabharata from India spoke thousands of years ago of wars in space. Paperclip at the end of World War II, under the administration of President Truman, brought in secretly German scientists from Mexico to the United States, and they were given an opportunity to work in the area called White Sands, New Mexico, and testing rockets, which eventually led to the Americans on the moon. But besides the positive use of science, we know that science was used negatively, and now this is being explored in relationship to events that seem to be documented underneath the ice of the Antarctic continent, namely habitats that were used by earlier societies and civilizations.
Right. I have to say, I mentioned that 64 areas of science would take a quantum leap, and they have been. If you go into any one of these areas, we're at a precipice now. Like right now, they've been able to, electromagnetism is a force. It's electric and magnetic fields that usually work in harmony. Now they're able to start splitting the magnetism off of the electro positive energies. So there's so many things. Look at cloning. I mean, not only are they cloning dogs, I think they're recently looking at the mixture of a monkey and a human. There's so much going on. So really, in a sense, we're at that point where we have to not only make positive decisions in what we do, but also realize, and the extraterrestrials, I think, realize that they have to come here and give us some positive energy. Otherwise, we could take a downward spiral.
Well, we're taking a technical drift towards self-destruction, thinking about putting weapons of mass destruction in space, which would destroy our biosphere. So we're putting all the information on the table as independent researchers, saying that beside official stories of why this has been covered up, there are other reasons in the human nature of why we need more education.
But we also, no, I just want to say we need to know the technology we have innate in us. So Elon Musk wants to put chips in people's heads so they'll be telepathic. We are already telepathic. We just have to be told that and taught that. Do we want these things in our bodies? The whole movement away from the exterior technology to the inner technology is where our future lies.
Absolutely. I was going to say, though, that when we went to Mars, and then the Russians did some probes to Mars called the Phobos probe, it had actually nuclear systems on board, not as weapons necessarily, but it could be dual use technology. And so when it was going into its orbital insertion around Phobos, which is one of the moons of Mars, there was this elongated shadow that was tracked right before it completely disappeared. And we believe that alien intelligence actually took it out because
the shadow was 26 kilometers long. So it was like a floating telephone pole of unknown technology.
They don't want our energies up there in space yet, unless we change our consciousness. And that's where really spiritual awareness does come in. And it's not a matter of becoming more and more knowledge based. It's also becoming more and more heart based.
And experience. So that's what I love about what you're doing with all your people that are so.
We brought a picture from our forthcoming book. Desiree and I are publishing a book. This is one exhibit of one of the extraterrestrial.
What is it?
This is a tall gray, as they're referred to, that has positive energy in the eyes, and you can see triangular forms in the face. And NASA, or one of the international news organizations, just released a clip of triangles, floating triangles in space. Desiree, would you talk about this?
Yeah, so actually, this is interesting when you talk about disclosure. In 2018 at 4 a.m, some people may have seen this, at least in terms of on the YouTube channels. People were driving by the Pentagon in Washington, Virginia area, and they saw this literally floating tetrahedron moving about it. Now, it's interesting that by itself would not be so great, but Jaime Maussan took a look at it, and 3 or 4 people actually reported, and some actually captured on film, that exact image. Now, in addition to that, in 2007 over the Kremlin, 2009 over the Kremlin, there was a similar vehicle. So they have been showing themselves not only just to people, but to direct government powers, the Kremlin, the Pentagon. So they're saying, hey, stop this, wake up. We don't want this kind of technology. You need to all grow up. And otherwise, we're going to have to step in at a certain point. They don't want to step in now. They only want to step in if things really go critical.
So why do you think they use this floating triangular form, Desiree?
Well, the tetrahedron is the basis foundation for all of science, even the molecules, the atoms in our body.
The hexagonal structure of the carbon atom is the suit of clothes that we wear. We are in carbon bodies. Our consciousness is being expanded.
Well, one more thing I want
that form, whether you call it a triangle or a hexagon, structure of two triangles together represents the next, shall we, phase of cosmic evolution.
It's a Merkabah, the double triangle. But one more thing I just want to throw out, and maybe to you too, my good friend, is maybe these things are not actually aliens. Maybe they're, like you said, portals to other dimensions, and other beings are coming into this realm. It appears as extraterrestrial, but maybe it's more because these triangles are portal doorways. That's how you create a portal. That's what we're seeing. Beings that are coming into this universe, into this dimension from someplace else to help uplift us, because we can no longer be stuck here, because the ground is sort of falling away underneath our feet.
I mean, I would like to feel like it's that simple, but I have to, just to be the devil's advocate right now. I mean, I believe in exopolitics, and I study exopolitics just as I study the politic of the cabal and the, puppets thereof. And so I just don't think it's this simplistic. Can we talk about that?
I agree.
This is one reason why government specialists perhaps are or have been reluctant to put all the things on the table, because they feel the people of the world are not prepared to deal with multidimensionality.
But there's also infighting within the government sources. That's what makes it even more complex. First, they don't know what's going on, and they don't know who to believe, and they want to come out, and yet there's other groups that want to suppress this.
So if we can go back to this 180 days from the COVID bill, which was, I guess, January.
December. It'll be due in June 24th.
Which is actually 47 years from the time Kenneth Arnold actually first coined the term "I saw a UFO" over
Flying saucer
over
Mount Rainier. So there's these cyclical dates. So it's not simple.
But I just want to say that now we've been talking to various ufologists, so to speak, who are saying, well, some say, wow, they're going to have to release all this information. What Alan didn't specify is they're releasing it first to the Senate Intelligence Committee, who is mostly having access to everything top secret anywhere in the United States for NSA, FBI, everything.
There are 18 different intelligence agencies.
But the final thing is then they need to write it up for the public. So it swings everywhere from we're going to have complete disclosure and the Senate Intelligence Committee is going to tell us everything, to those who say it's just another ruse. So
because they're not ready to tell us all. Are they ready to tell us they okayed abductions of people in exchange for technology? I mean, it gets very dense.
But it's also, I don't think there's even American presidents. Not every American president read into the true exopolitic. And I believe for sure this president is not.
No, I think Bush Sr. was the last, and that was only because he was CIA. Before him, actually, supposedly JFK and everyone, and Nixon also knew all the way down to Bush. But after Bush, CIA, not the senior one, they have not told anyone. And so, I mean, it has not gone into the ears of the president.
I think I'll just be a real devil's advocate. I think Trump was absolutely read in.
You think so? Well, why hasn't he come out with it?
He did more for disclosure. I don't care about your politics. Trump did more for disclosure than any other president.
What did he do? I want to know what you said he did for disclosure. I'm just curious.
I mean, there was a lot of transparency that he was trying to push forward. And also, I mean, this is an intuitive feeling, but then when I interviewed Dr. Michael Salla, he said 100% Trump is read it.
Okay, well, I'm not sure about Trump by our U.S. government, by the Pentagon people, but I do think he was read in by other governments, like the Israeli government. And I think that's right before he went out, Professor Eshed, E-S-H-E-D. You can look that up. Yeah, I think told him everything. So like actually astronaut Mitchell, who was a very good friend of ours, he had to go to his friends. And because what happened with Mitchell, which is a very similar thing, is that he didn't see anything per se out in outer space, but he was raised in Roswell, New Mexico. Right. So when he went home after being like this proud, astronaut, they started taking him to the side and saying, hey, there were really alien bodies here. So he started asking his personal friends and they go, oh yeah, there's alien bodies, so he got all the information he needed, but there was no official channels.
But there is a fracture within the cabal, whatever you want to call it, that some people are saying the lies the abuse, the enslavement of who we are as human beings can't go on any longer. And that's what
Well, which
this,
side, from aliens or from ours?
no, from
From both. I
Yeah,
mean,
right.
that's they're complicit. That's the part of, I think that's what they're trying to hide, is that there's a slave trade, and the governments have been highly they've been trading basically humans for technology.
And one of the things we say to overcome that, which is interesting, because we've had people who have been abducted and they've used certain names of God. And I'm going to say you could use it in the Sanskrit or the Hebrew or whatever you want. You think about that consciousness, it breaks it right away. So it's something that they haven't told people, but we've told people many times, if you're abducted, try to break through with those levels of higher consciousness.
Divine expressions.
Because actually it goes back to consciousness also. They don't want to pick up people that have a higher consciousness. They're picking up people. And some people say, oh, I made the agreement before you.
I didn't say that.
I'd like to show this other book that
But
we've
the
written.
idea, you get the idea.
What is this?
Called
here?
Negotiating with Other Worlds. It goes into work we as space scientists,
Mhm.
space law researchers have published articles through major universities such as McGill University of Canada on how we must preserve the resources on Mars, the water resources, et cetera, et cetera. So there's already behind the scenes a space law being worked out. I share the same lawyer with Buzz Aldrin, the second man on the moon, as some of the other astronauts. And we know that it's just a matter of time before we are brought into the realization that we have kind folk who will share with us advanced psychology and knowledge that we need to survive as a species.
But to be honest, we feel that 80% of the universe out there is totally positive, wants to help us. There's a small percentage that is taking advantage of us that our government cannot stop. And in some cases seems to be in cahoots,
Right.
as you're saying. But for the majority, they're the good guys. And you were saying about these threshold gates, I think it's interesting that even though we've been in quarantine for the last, we'll say 6,000 years since the last flood, to protect us from what was noted in the Dead Sea Scrolls of the Book of Giants, the sons of the local heavens that actually took advantage of the female people on our planet. But anyway, going back to that, occasionally they've been able to come through some of these.
Well, it's
portals that
coming
they
through
create.
more. Don't you feel it's cracking? Don't you feel
Well, yeah.
that old structure is just kind of fragmenting away? So real spiritual awareness can be part of everyone's life.
No, it has to be in the change what we're going to be experiencing.
So how can we protect ourselves and how can we prepare ourselves?
That's a good
It
question.
comes down to having a positive consciousness, a greater love of the heart for all humanity, a greater respect for consciousness that doesn't stop with Mother Earth, that evolution continues to the stars. And this is what we illustrate in our award-winning films called The Light Body and The Merkaba, Voyage of a Starseed. And in this, we're taken into a multidimensional scenario of how we learn to take our baby steps and swim in space.
And we would say also keep your consciousness linked to the highest possible reality that you can work with and imagine, because that focuses your energy and it calls in that energy anytime you need it. And it doesn't matter if you're walking down the street, going to get hit by a car, someone's trying to protect you from the other side, or if you're in touch with alien intelligence.
The use of yoga is very important, of connecting our body with the higher spirit realm, higher consciousness development, and also the use of music. Again, I want to emphasize in my work with Ravi Shankar and also Alice Coltrane, the wife of the famous musician John Coltrane. She was interested in the Sanskrit and the Hebrew mantras that I taught her to use in making conversation with what we would call the higher dimensions of the universal intelligence. So follow their work in music and follow our website, because we have many of the great musicians that we work with working on the musical language of the future.
And I wanted to write this book as a positive note, as a tribute, as a freedom letter to humanity. So I go a very positive, optimistic route that we're going to make it into this next level of reality. And we're going to come into a time where creativity is abundant, love, possibility, compassion. This is the world we want to create.
Yeah.
As I show this picture also from one of my artistic friends in the Middle East, it's really by the area of the Dome of the Rock in the Middle East. It's the whole idea of how the spiritual and the physical body combine in ascension.
Mm.
Marvelous relationship to how the ancients all over the world, from India to the Holy Land to beyond, in the New World, recognized that there were those who developed their mind and body in such a unique way that they could ascend and enter into the higher worlds.
Well, and that's what you're doing, aren't you?
And that's the whole
Yeah.
festival that we're all celebrating. Thanks to you and your associates, we feel
Thank you.
very honored to be here.
I would love to continue this conversation in other iterations. It was just such a delight to meet you both. And Alan, I'm so excited for this book. I think it's really, I know it's going to be a bestseller, and everyone who listens to this now and in the future, order Making Contact. Is it still pre-order, or you
It's
actually?
pre-order. It's out May 4th. So I'm going to come to Rama. We'll probably do an in-person event where everyone could show up. Maybe I'll bring the Hurtaks and some other people from the book. Whitley Strieber, maybe Daryl Anka could come. They're all in this book because I wanted to go from the exterior, the exoteric, to the esoteric. So from the nuts and bolts to how it's affecting each one of us. How are we merging with this ET consciousness? Because we're not from this earth. We're part of something greater. And it's about time we all knew it, right? So here we are, waking up.
I think this is just a formative book for this new era, and I just want to say to everyone, order the book, order the actual copy of the book. It makes a difference besides the Kindle. Order the book, pre-order the book, makes a difference for the first week of sales.
Yes.
So everybody listening now and in the future, order this book, Making Contact, as well as visit the great, I mean, you guys have done so much work. I mean, from the
Your
books
website.
to the music. Yeah. Can you give everybody your website?
Right. So our main website is keysofenoch.org. So we're happy to have people. And we agree that we're part of a greater cosmos. And really, we're just visiting this planet, and it's a great awakening. We're all it's key that we're here now because it's really the day of graduation is coming before
It's
us.
very exciting times. Can't you feel the energy that's pulsing through all of this? So
Schoolhouse Mother Earth is opening its windows and doors. So all of you throughout the world, be prepared for the, shall we say, the great thrill of realizing not only we're not alone in the universe, but we are also cosmic citizens ready to graduate and have a passport to the cosmos.
and start making contact. You can get it on Amazon, and it's always great.
But follow those who share the great love of the divine spark and the understanding that we are here to help humanity, not to take, but to serve and to share and to grow spiritually.
And it's always great to see you, my dear friend, Guru Jagat.
It was so good to see you, and thank you so much, all of you, and more of this. And we'll see you soon, and bless you all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to another episode of Reality Riffing. These are conversations that I think are important with people who are doing great things in the world about subject matters that need to be discussed. If you enjoyed the content, the conversation, please feel free to share with your people, share with your friends and family, rate the podcast below, and also subscribe.